on planet Earth. And we just pray that you would continue to fill Dr. Ellis with your spirit and share with us what we need to hear that will help us on our journey with you to heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.
I might need that. Good afternoon. You're so spread apart. It'll be like a ping pong or a tennis match or something, looking back and forth. All right, let's pick up where we left off this morning, continuing to talk about our media choices, and this time moving really into social life. And while I am going to tell you a few more alarming things right here at the beginning related specifically to media and our social life, the good news is coming really soon, and it's coming during this session. So I don't want you to give up that we're going to be hearing about some things that we can do to make life go in the direction that we would really like it to, toward God's kingdom, toward better times with our family and that sort of thing. So let's begin by looking at some thoughts about our phones and our social life. In fact, I brought my phone up here with me. It is muted, but it's on actually, but it's muted, so hopefully it won't, we won't get too many calls or texts while we're talking here, but I brought it so that we can look at it, we can think about our phones and about our social life related to these devices. The Washington Post had an article way back in 2014 about why we should, and I love this in parentheses part, really, seriously, permanently stop using our smartphones at dinner, please. And we actually do have this guideline at our house, no phones at the table. And it's a pretty good one. There may be a lot of things we can debate, but I think this one is pretty solid. No phones at the table. Survey last March, so this is a while ago, but suggested that nearly 9 in 10 people feel that their loved ones neglect them in favor of technology on a weekly basis. I won't ask you to raise your hands if you feel that way, but I'll raise mine because I feel that way sometimes at my house, and sometimes I'm the one who's causing others to feel neglected, and sometimes I'm the one feeling neglected. A smaller scale observational study suggested that when parents and young children dine together, parents frequently pay the most attention to their phones. So often we'll say things like, "Oh, I wish I could just get my kids off their phone." I say that. 2 17-year-olds and a 19-year-old. I wish I could just get them off their phones. But studies show that especially when the phones come to the table, it's the parents who are really on the phone a lot, so not the best examples perhaps. Using your phone at dinner isn't just rude, it also makes you unhappy. Look at this restaurant picture. Been to a restaurant recently? Actually, I'm on a little quest to find restaurants that don't have large screen TVs in them. I really am. What in the world happened to a dining experience? You're certainly not going to go out on a romantic dinner with your spouse at a restaurant with a TV, especially if there's a ball game on. Not going to happen. So, looking for those quiet spaces, and our phones can be just as distracting. Elizabeth Dunn and Ryan Dwyer, 2 researchers from the University of British Columbia, couldn't help but notice a trend. You see people in restaurants all the time who are sitting across the table from each other, and instead of staring at each other, they're staring at their phones, says Dwyer, a doctoral candidate in psychology. We were really curious. Is it having an impact on people's social interactions? How much they're enjoying the time they're spending with other people? The short answer they found is yes, and not for the better. Phone use during a meal led to a modest but noticeable decrease in diners' enjoyment, according to their research, which was published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology. Technology at the table caused people to feel more distracted and less socially engaged, leading to a drop in enjoyment equivalent to 0.5 point on a 7-point scale, explains Dunn, a professor of psychology and the study's senior author. Phone use may be contagious. People are more likely to use their phones when others around them are using their phones. So that suggests that there may be this sort of domino effect, she explains. By putting your own phone away, you might be creating a positive domino effect. I really like that sentence because it says that we can model something else, especially if the people around us actually aren't on the phone so much that they don't even notice that we put ours away. So we can model better behavior with each other, and the more people you have at a table at a restaurant, this is particularly true with college students. I go on trips with college students fairly often, like twice a year, to go to conferences or film festivals. And so I'm traveling with them, I'm at the table with them, and I've observed this. If you've got a group of people where one or two people gets out their phone, then pretty soon they're all on the phone. But if nobody does, then they actually engage with each other and are having a great time. So it kind of takes a few key leaders in the group who have in their minds, and I've never had a conversation with them about this, so I don't know what they're thinking, but apparently sometimes in some groups you've got a few key people who really appreciate actual interaction. And so they don't do it, and then it ends up being a much better social event for them. Sherry Turkle is one of my favorite authors. Her book, Alone Together, which is not the one that we're referencing right here, but her book, Alone Together, is really the book that started me on this whole quest of study and making presentations and all of those things. She's an amazing person, good writer, and a professor at MIT, a place where they know something about technology. Yes. And yet she's talking not about the development of technologies as much as she's talking about how does the development of technologies affect who we are as people, the human effect. She says studies of conversation both in the laboratory and in natural settings show that when two people are talking, the mere presence of a phone on the table between them or in the periphery of their vision changes both what they talk about and the degree of connection they feel. This is a surprising one to me. But think about it. If the phone is sitting there, don't you wonder if in a moment a text is going to come through or an update about something and that the person with you is going to pick it up and be distracted? You just don't know. People keep the conversation on topics where they won't mind being interrupted. They don't feel as invested in each other. Even a silent phone disconnects us. Our phones are not accessories, but psychologically potent devices that change not just what we do, but who we are. So, this isn't the main guideline section of the speech, but I just had to throw this in here right now. So some things about our phones that we can all do. It's not hard. No phones at the dinner table. It's not that hard. Just don't bring it. Put it somewhere else. Sit down and dine together. No phone when someone is talking with you. No phone when someone's talking with you. And have set times for leaving your phone at home or for turning it off. We've actually taken a few little, it's been a while, it was right before COVID, we took a little technology vacation. And we literally went away for the weekend to a little condo. And we called it our spiritual retreat weekend. I know it was right before COVID because some people, it was literally about 3 weeks before everything shut down. And some of the people were masked and everything, and they had special cleaning at the condo. But we just went to have this weekend. Nobody was allowed to use their phone during the weekend. We did watch one Christian movie on Saturday night, but it was all a spiritual retreat weekend that we planned for our family. And I'm thinking, that was a long time ago now, we need to do it again. But you can plan times, and they don't have to be big things like a whole weekend like that. It can just be, hey, from 7 to 8 this evening, nobody's going to be on their phone. And we're all just going to talk together and have a time together and do something together and see what happens. We'll talk a little bit more about not just phones, but with all of our media use, what we can do in a few minutes. This is from NPR very recently, last May. About 95% of U.S. teens today use some type of social media, and about a third say that they use it, quote, almost constantly. The Pew Research Center found in August, that's what they found in August. At the same time, teens and tweens are facing a mental health crisis. Is it a coincidence? And research indicates that these two trends are intertwined. The social media can cause depression and lower life satisfaction. And this is not the first of those kind of studies. They're building these kind of studies that show some sort of connection between how much time you spend on social media and your level of satisfaction in life. And when the satisfaction is low, depression comes. We also realize that during the whole COVID time when we had so much isolation and separation and people were on media more, it was the only way we could connect. It wasn't the same as being together in person. It wasn't the same. The levels of depression rose so much during that time. And here is another one. This is the kind of thing that surprised me as well when I first read it. And this is from Sherry Turkle's book, Stop Googling, Let's Talk, which was a follow-up to her Alone Together book. And here she's talking about a loss of empathy. And if we look around our world and in our culture, we recognize that empathy is on the decline. Feeling for another, caring about another, not being combative and divisive, but really trying to understand each other. It's not what we're really good at right now, culturally. So this study found, this is from the University of Michigan, 40% decline in empathy among college students, with most of the decline taking place after the year 2000. Across generations, technology is implicated in the assault on empathy. We've gotten used to being connected all the time, but we have found ways around conversation, at least from conversation that is open-ended and spontaneous, in which we play with ideas and allow ourselves to be fully present and fully vulnerable. And you've probably observed this with yourself. I've certainly observed it with my children who are from a technology generation. The smartphones came in 2007. My kids were born in 2003 and 2005, so they barely can remember before we were in the world of smartphone use and always connected sort of technology. And they are afraid to make a phone call. It is hard to actually talk with something. It's so much easier for them to carefully craft what they want to say on a text, or if they have to be old school in certain settings, on an email. But it's so much easier. Most of their conversations with their friends are by text. I don't even know, I'm not even a part of these conversations till later I hear, oh, so-and-so said, or so-and-so, and I'm like, we haven't been with this person in, a week. What did they say and when did they say it? And it's through text. And I've said to my daughter when she's lonely in the summer, well, why don't you just call your friend? Oh, no, Mom, we don't do that. We don't do that, Mom. Oh, Mom, that would be so awkward. I don't know what we would say. I'll just text her. Okay, so they text back, but it isn't the same. It doesn't fill the lonely hole like she was needing in the summer, which is why I'm suggesting an actual conversation, right? Which did happen a couple of times. But the nervousness about doing it is really related to, I guess you're looking up here, I'm looking down there, what we're seeing here. That always connected, but not in those very one-on-one interpersonal kind of conversations. And a little inspiration once again, which we certainly need as we look at these things. For the commandment is a lamp, and the teaching is light, and reproofs for discipline are the way of life. That's from Proverbs. So as we're all just kind of giving ourselves a little slap on the hand right now. I'm giving myself one. So I'm up here talking, I'm thinking about the places where I'm a bit hypocritical in the things that I'm sharing, or what we would like to do, or the way I wish it was, and then the way it really is. And we're all saying, yeah, a little reproof, a little way forward, doing something better, making a change would be good. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. That's the way of light. We're asking God to guide our path and to direct us and be that lamp to lead us forward. So we shouldn't be surprised if there's some reproofs along the way, because that is the way of life. It is the way into a better life. So the technologies that 50 years ago we could only dream of in science fiction novels, which we then actually created with so much faith and hope in their power to unite us and to make us freer, have been co-opted into tools of surveillance, behavioral manipulation, radicalization, and addiction. And this statement, which came from the Pew Research Center, but they said right there on their website that it was anonymous from some anonymous professor, so I sure wish I know who said that, but they don't seem to. Whoever said it doesn't want to be revealed, I think, is how it is. But it's a really, really good observation about what has happened. Haven't we all had the best intentions for the internet? The best intentions for our smartphones? And some people even have some really great intentions for artificial intelligence, and there are some really good uses for artificial intelligence. But at the same time, we have so many questions, so many things that haven't gone right with how these things played out. There's these rumors that some of the people, maybe the key person responsible for the development of the internet, would undo it if he could, because of all the damage that's been done. There's been a lot of good, too. Think of how we can access knowledge now, of all the amazing ways we can get information. I can almost not remember what it was like to try to do research before the internet. Going to libraries and digging through books and not even knowing where to start, and such a limited amount of information compared to now. So, and can you imagine not being connected with your cell phone? Your smart device? I mean, I got to the church this morning thanks to my cell phone. It's really, really helpful. So we have all of these high hopes and lots of good things that happen with technology. Tons of good things that happen with it. And I would like to propose that the reason why it's been co-opted in the ways that are described here is because guess who's using the technology? Humans. Humans in a sinful world, and wherever we go, there we are. So wherever we go and whatever technologies we develop to try to make life better for ourselves, we're still a sinful people. And we've still got that problem. And so it remains that no matter what technologies we develop, we have to use them for good, and those are day-by-day decisions. Alfred Hitchcock. Who's Alfred Hitchcock? Who was Alfred Hitchcock? He was a famous director, yeah? Of thrillers, at least, yeah. Of thrillers. So he loved to keep people in a bit of suspense and tell a suspenseful story, and he was good at it, and he used a lot of, as a filmmaking teacher, I know he used a lot of techniques in his filmmaking, particular camera angles and techniques that added to that suspense and that kind of grew the industry in the technique side. Well, he once said, "The cinema is not a slice of life, but a piece of cake." Now, what could he have meant by this? I wondered that. In fact, I didn't even know who said it, because when I first started teaching at Southern Adventist University, we were decorating my brand new office there. This was 2009. My kids were little, and their dad and the kids went and bought some artwork for my office. And one of the pieces of artwork, because I was going to be teaching some film stuff there, was this poster with these words on it: "The cinema is not a slice of life, but a piece of cake." And I wondered who in the world said that. So, of course, I Googled it. That's how we get all the information, right? And it was him. What could he have meant by that? Well, he never said, at least my best Google searches could not tell me what he said, so I have my own take on what he said. Isn't that beautiful? Oof, that's a gorgeous looking cake. All right. So, not a slice of life, but a piece of cake. In other words, when we see a movie that's been crafted and put together, or a television show for that matter, this is not a piece of actual life. This is artwork that has been carefully put together. I was involved in a movie production this summer. We're doing a 22-minute film out of the Center for Media Ministry. And I resist right now telling you too much about it because I'm super excited about this project. But It's a lot of work, a lot of people. I mean, we had 30 people just during production, and there's more involved in post-production and more were involved in the pre, and it cost $95,000 that was raised through various entities who believe in this story we're going to tell. It's not life. It's art, very carefully crafted and put together by a lot of people, kind of like this beautiful cake here. This cake has a lot of ingredients in it. It's very special. It's put together. So that's probably what Alfred Hitchcock kind of meant by it. Like, when you go to see a movie, you're not just looking at life, you're looking at something that's really crafted together. Well, there's another little meaning that I like to attach to it, and that is cinema is like cake. Wow, that cake looks great, and it is tasty. It looks beautiful. I'm sure it tastes beautiful, and it's enjoyable and fun to eat. But we don't have cake every day. And if we do, it has consequences. So that's kind of how it is with cinema and movies, visual media, right? They're like eye candy. They're cake. They're rich. They're enjoyable. They're fun. They're specially crafted. But maybe not for every day, right? Kind of a special treat. So that's another way that I like to think about it. Just reminding you of my favorite word here, perspicacity. By the way, one of you, and who I'm not sure is here this afternoon, said it was also her favorite word, and she didn't know anybody else who had ever used the word. So she said she's been using it with her kids. I love it. Perspicacity, the Latin word for penetrating sight. If you have perspicacity, you're good at discerning what is really going on. And that's why we're here today, to try to figure that out a little bit, to become more aware, to be, as we say in my field of study, media literate, knowing how to understand the language, speak the language, and understand the influences. So now let's finally get to some biblical principles about this. I've been waiting for this for hours now. Okay, so what can we do? What are some, does the Bible even say anything about how we relate with our media? And how could the Bible say something about how we relate with media when there was no visual media back in the day when this stuff was written? All these technologies were far, far from people's minds. Well, I think it does, because the Bible speaks to principles about how we live our lives. So the first one, shut your eyes to evil. And we get this out of a couple of biblical passages, one in Isaiah 33 and another in Psalm 101. Isaiah 33, 14 and 15 says this, "Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire?" I have to pause here. What is this talking about? Who is the devouring fire? God's presence. It's God. It is. Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Who dwells with God? This is the answer, he who walks righteously and speaks uprightly, he who despises the gain of oppressions, who gestures with his hands, refusing bribes, who stops his ears from hearing of bloodshed, and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. And then from Psalm 103:3, I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. So, I think these things can really easily apply to visual media. And I should qualify by saying it doesn't mean that we would deny that all evil exists in the world, or ever hear a story where something bad happens, or watch a story where something difficult happens to someone. We know, even in our mission stories, even in our Bible stories, this is the case. I'm talking about watching content for entertainment's sake that is only entertaining because it is violent. That's not a reason to watch violence or to play a violent game or whatever because violence is entertaining. Violence is not meant to be entertaining. Violence is evil. So stopping our ears from hearing bloodshed and shutting our eyes from seeing evil, not for entertainment's sake. So I think that's one biblical principle that we can use as we try to lay out for ourselves some guidelines about how we would live, how we would make these media choices that we're all making, that we have to make. Look at the good. Romans 12:9 and Philippians 4:8. Here's from Romans. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. It's really simple. If you see something good, go for that. Look at that. Pay attention to that. Nurture yourself with that rather than the evil. Turning away from the evil and clinging to what is good. And then, of course, this very famous passage from Philippians 4, which I used to actually have printed out and stuck to the bed head on my, this is a really long time ago, I don't even know if you remember this, but when we were first married, I had printed this out on little paper and I stuck it right on the little, we had one of these beds with a little bookshelf at the top, and it was just stuck there. Whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue and if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. I really like this one because it's in the positive. This is the positive. Go toward the good stuff. And this is the best way to get over a problem in anything. Instead of just concentrating all the time on what I'm not going to do, concentrating on what you are aiming toward, what you are going to do, what is good. Looking that direction, looking to God, looking to his kingdom, finding places where his kingdom is being shown, being discussed, being written about, and looking at those things. And pretty soon you just won't have time for any garbage. You'll be too busy on the good stuff. Use your time well. Oy. Yeah, it's harder to use your time well when you're tired. We'll just pause on that for a second. It is. Use your time well. Ephesians 5:15 and 16, and Acts 17:21, which is kind of a strange one, but I'll explain it. So Ephesians 5:15 and 16, which was our text this morning for church. Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. Making the most of your time. I'm so good at this at 6 a.m. What do I do at 6 a.m.? I either read my Bible or go for a walk and pray. It's so easy when I'm rested, when I first get up in the morning, to go, duh! I'm a morning person, by the way. It's a new day. I'm so happy to be awake. And here's the things that are in my, and that I've got in mind today. And I'm going to have a great day. And I'm going to do this. And I'm starting with my walk. And I'm going to pray through my walk. And I'm going to read my Bible. And woohoo! At 8 p.m., it is way harder to use my time well. I've been working hard. I'm tired. Everything's been challenging all day long. And I say to myself, if I could just sit down and watch something. Yes, and once in a while there's something good to watch, right? Sitting down to watch something isn't so bad if it's something good and you are tired and it's the end of the day. But it's also easy to not be as discerning when you're tired about what you're going to watch. So, using time well is a biblical principle. Make the most of it, because the days are evil. Now, what in the world with this last one I have here, Acts 17:21? Now, this is just a parenthetical comment. Now, all the Athenians, it really is in Paul's writings, Luke's writings there, it's in parentheses. Now, all the Athenians and the strangers visiting there used to spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. This is for all the news addicts in the world. Well, it's just the news. Yeah, so okay, but you don't waste your time even on just hearing the latest thing or the newest thing or whatever's going on that might not even be that helpful to you. I don't mean you should not find out what's happening in the world. I'm not saying that. Okay, have some self-control. Whew, how many times did my father say that to me growing up? Self-control. 2 things before going off to school. Treat everybody well. Number 2, have some self-control. Those are the 2. 2 Peter 1, 5-8. Applying all diligence, in your faith supply moral excellence, and in your moral excellence, knowledge, and in your knowledge, self-control, and in your self-control, perseverance, and in your perseverance, godliness, and in your godliness, brotherly kindness, and in your brotherly kindness, love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they render you neither useless nor unfruitful in the true knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. So among that list of very, very important things, there is self-control. Self-control is one of the important qualities in being useful to God's kingdom. rather than useless or unfruitful. So we need to be self-aware in that way, and we don't have to do everything we feel like doing. Getting back to, the parts of our brain. Let stuff process through the front part of your brain, through your frontal lobes, and make good choices, having some control. And then witness well for the kingdom. This is 1 Peter 2:12. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation. So if for no other reason at all, then whatever it is you're doing with the name Christian attached to yourself is having an influence on other people, if for no other reason. Witness well for the kingdom. People are watching you. My kids, unfortunately, are watching me. The other night, my son called me a hypocrite. That was something to think about for a little bit. I still think he might have been wrong, but it certainly opened up the way for a healthy discussion about what he was concerned about, for sure. So witnessing well for the kingdom, living well for the sake of God's kingdom, because other people are watching and observing what we do. So another biblical principle. And now, this is just a slide so we can kind of visualize life with less screen time, I suppose. We can talk about this a little bit. So what's it like if you're not on your screen? Well, then you must be doing what my dad used to say when I was a kid. We're living real life. When you're not on your screen, you're living real life. You're out there, you're doing something, you're talking with other people, you're having those conversations that Sherry Turkle is always trying to encourage in her books that she's writing. You have time to play some games together. We do have one child who loves nothing more than to play a great board game. Loves it. And the more, he said it's his favorite quality time with the family because we can all be around. So we also have one child who doesn't like board games at all. So that creates something of a tension. But that's one of the things people can do together. Having the chance to actually read together, whether it's reading spiritual material or reading the Bible or reading something that you're all enjoying. We actually had a conversation just a few months back about how we felt like we were all on our screens too much in our family. And I said, I give these seminars and I feel like ever since COVID, we're just like the people I'm trying to tell to get off their screens. We're those people. And how are we going to get off our screen, not being on it so much? And one of the kids said, let's read the entire Chronicles of Narnia together as a family, out loud. And they said, and this is for you, Mom, because you've never read them. Even though I watched the movie. I had read the first book, the Chronicles, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but none of the others. This is for you, Mom, you need to know. And I thought, okay, what a great suggestion. And I know not everybody loves those books. I'm not saying you have to love those books or whatever, but the idea of doing that together, and this is kind of a long series, so this wasn't let's do this one evening and it's over. It took us a long time trying to get the whole family together at the same time and having these reading sessions of reading the books together. And it was great. It was a great suggestion, something to do together. Just having the time to spend with people. And then getting outside. So I threw in a little mountain biking picture there, but the opportunity to get outside and be active. Really, really another alternative. So we all know these things that we can do other than, let me say a word more about this. Well, I'll come to it when I talk about intentional, but you have to plan it in. You can't let life just happen to you if you want to be off your screen. I'm sorry, it's a little bit more work. It really does take more energy, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So here's some tips, the promised tips that I keep saying we will have. First of all, pray about this topic, and I don't say this lightly. I know as Christians it's easier for us to just say, pray about it about everything. I really mean this. Pray about this for yourself and for your family members. If you can get some family members to pray with you about it, that's even better. I know my husband and I have found that praying for our kids together, which we don't remember to do every day, when we do, we can see a difference, and it's really, really important. I know we're praying individually, but praying together is even better. So if you have to be on your own, if there's nobody else in your family who wants to pray about this topic, then just start by yourself. But pray about it first for you, and then for the other people, your kids, your grandkids, whoever's in your sphere of influence. And ask God to do something in your own life and to do something in theirs. And He will show up and do it, even if you're seeing just small changes. Create sacred spaces, both physically and in time. So here's a couple of things, physically, okay? And I'm just going to give you one example. You can come up with your own ideas, 2 examples maybe. You can come up with your own ideas what to do. But a couple of things that we have done at our household. One is that our smartphones have a home. They have a home, and it isn't I do have a home in my purse when I'm out traveling, and my husband has a home in his pocket, but that's not their permanent home. That's just a home when we're out wherever we need to be. When we get to our house that we live in, the phones go on the charging station, and that whether or not they need to be charged, okay? They don't have to be plugged in, they just live there, which is by our landline phone. And we probably don't need the landline anymore, but we kept it for a long time because we didn't let our kids have any phones at all until they were 16, which is only a year ago for 2 of them. So we had to have a landline so we could get in touch with them and they with us if we were out and about. So the phones all live there. So now we have a landline and 5 phones living there, and that's where they live at home. So that's a way to create a sacred space by having them, that's where they are, unless you are using it for something. So then it's really obvious who's using their phone, because it's not there, and they should have some good reason for why they're using it, hopefully, which is also not always the case, but they should. And at our house, we have a rule that phones do not go into the bathroom. Phones, because the bathroom is where people hide and do things on their phones they shouldn't be doing. Not that anyone in our house does that. They don't. I'm not saying that. But that's what typically can happen. So no phones in the bathroom, no phones in the bedroom. And that includes my husband and I. Our phones don't come to our nightstands because they don't go in the bedroom. The phones are out in the living area, dining, family, kitchen. That's it. And for our kids, whose bedrooms are all upstairs, there's no phones upstairs. So that's where the family room is and their rooms. And this is not always easy, okay? Now that they're older, they all got Spotify now. And this is how they want to listen to their music. And thankfully, our kids have made really good choices with music. So it's not that we're rejecting what they're listening to. Not at all. But now we have a little dilemma. Because it used to be that we gave them CDs, or they bought CDs, or they asked for CDs for Christmas. And we purposefully bought them technology that included CD players so they could listen to music in their rooms. Now, they want access to all the music that we now have on Spotify. And, Mom, how am I going to listen to my Spotify music in my room? Well, they can cast it to their devices and listen, but what about the phone? And so we went around and around about where are we going to put those phones so that you can go in your room and listen to music. And my son finally came up with, he goes, how about, there's a little bookshelf, this is my daughter's room we were talking about, there's a little bookshelf right outside her room. How about if she just, it can reach and cast into her player in her room. How about if she just sets the phone out there on the bookshelf, because she wanted to go in her room and close the door and have her quiet time, which I appreciate. It might not seem like it today, but I'm kind of introverted. So that was the plan. So it does go upstairs then when she's going to listen to something from Spotify, but it sits on the shelf there, and then she can go into her room, close the door, but her phone is not in her room. You get it, with the door closed. We don't know what she's doing on her phone, right? So these sound kind of wacky and weird, but these are sort of creative ways we're trying to make to deal with the idea. The basic bottom line principle is we want those sacred spaces in their rooms, and we don't want them to be in there with doors closed on their phones. Or they can't take their laptops upstairs either, so all the same phones or laptops can't go. So that's how we created some sacred spaces. And also, we have one family computer that's in an armoire in a main living area that can open up and close. And the kids, when they're on the laptops they need for school, that's also in an open area where everyone can walk by. And then we also have a television in the family room, but it's also in an armoire. And this is where my kids tease me to death. They're like, why does that thing have to be in an armoire that we can close away? I said, because I love the look of organic and not electronic, and like we just warmly live here without a bunch of screens staring at us all the time. And they think I'm really weird, but it's okay. Even my husband might think I'm weird, but that's okay too. So, and finally, and this is probably the most important tip of all, and it's kind of ambiguous in a sense, but I'm saying be intentional. In other words, you don't have to let life happen to you. You don't have to let media happen to you. Make a plan. Pray about it. Think about it. Create these spaces. I have to go back because I forgot to say something, another one, but be intentional. And if you're having an issue in your household, then you bring it up. Talk about it. Okay, and I think we're going to get to that a little bit more here in a second. But let me go back to sacred spaces in time. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. Many of us here are Seventh-day Adventist. That's the best sacred time to have, from your technology. Take a break. Take a rest from your technology on Sabbath. I know that Daniel and I really try that. It's not quite as successful with our teenagers as it is with us. They are from a different generation. But we really, I would say even they take a break compared to a regular day for sure. And we really try to set aside some time where we can let God speak to us in other ways besides being on our devices all the time. Okay, yes, be intentional. Make a plan. Create these spaces. Decide when. Say, hey, we're going to have an evening without it because we just are. So let's do it. Let's enjoy it. Like we did with reading this series of books together and that sort of thing. And then as I was starting to get to here, talk about the topic with your kids or the other people in your life, your grandkids, your spouse, or whoever. Talk about it. You have to talk about it. And yes, can these things get people riled up? Boy, can they. One of the people who was at the church service this morning was telling me at lunch that, just telling one of their kids that they had to have a fast from their media was like withdrawal, and it is like withdrawal. We talked about the addictiveness of it, and boy, did they get some fight and pushback. Don't be surprised if you get fight and pushback. And we really can't to say, since I said yes to Pastor Shoup about coming to give this seminar, I actually had a conversation with my children on a very interesting and rough afternoon of us all talking together about how things weren't going the way I really wanted them to in our household, especially related to the phones and to some extent the laptops. And that didn't they feel like they'd like to be free of them more than they are. And we went around and around. You were still at work. But we went around and around about it. But we talked about it. And I'm talking with one adult, barely, he's barely an adult, and two almost adults, and we're trying to respect each other and just go around and talk about, but get it out. Be able to express, what's my expectation? What's your expectation? And what would you like to see? And how could it be? Discuss it. Don't be afraid to, and don't be afraid of conflict in the sense that you can't talk about things because somebody might get upset or somebody might cry or someone might push back at you. Because certainly we had some pushback going both directions, but at the end we all understood each other and we all wanted to move in a positive direction. Everybody. We had something in common for sure. It's worth it. It's worth talking about it instead of just ignoring it. And don't assume that you have to have the latest technology on everything. I just said that because I'm a late adopter. I finally fessed it up. I really am. Here I am working in a media field and I'm a late adopter. That means I don't grab onto technology early. I'm not going to be your first person to go out there and write something using AI. I'm not. I wasn't the first person to get I was waited till the last moment before my colleagues told me if you don't get a smartphone, you're not going to be a legitimate communication professor. So I'm not an early adopter because I really kind of live by this. I don't have to have it just because it exists, right? And until sometimes it becomes clear that you kind of do have to have it to get along in society. So just something to throw in there. You don't have to have it just because it came out. And then seek out healthy and active alternatives. I couldn't emphasize this enough, probably, because as we already said, If you want something out of your life, put something good into your life instead. That's what we know for all addiction. All addiction. You have to trade out the thing that you're doing, probably to soothe some emotional issues that are frustrating you. You have to replace that with something better. Replace it with something better. And so this is part of being intentional too. You can't just say, like I can't just say to the kids, put your phones away. Okay, I have. But put your phones away. I say that way too often. Put your phones away without having some other plan about what is it we're going to do that will be more interesting and more exciting. And I am so happy because my sons have returned to their hobby. A few years ago, they started a model railroad. We gave up our entire guest room, which is really small, by the way, because it was sort of an office that we made into a guest room. We gave it up to be the model railroad room because Daniel and I said to each other, this would be great. They're showing an interest in it. We will help them build. He built the tables, helped them build the tables for it to go on. We've spent probably way too much money, and they've spent a lot of their own money too, on model railroad stuff because we actually said, this beats video games. This beats being on the technology all the time. This is great. So we tried to encourage that interest they had as much as possible. And over the last couple months, they have really returned to it. And they're building like crazy on that thing. And it is the best thing that's happened to them with getting off of their devices and getting back to that hobby that they had. And now they're kind of in a rush because one of them, Garrett, is going to plan to go to Italy next, not this school year, but the one after. And so they feel this pressure, like, we got to get this thing built before Garrett goes to Italy for the year for ACA. So I think that's helping to spur them into working on it. But find things like that. Encourage them. Our daughter loves sewing costumes that are period piece costumes. And is very, very interested in that. So we've also bought her an insane amount of fabric. Some of it not the cheapest, but because we want her to be doing that instead of other things that she could be doing that she's interested in active with. So whatever it is with your kids, it'll be something different for every kid, right? And I'm not saying go out and build a model railroad, only if that's the passion for your kids. And that's some more inspiration. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind and put on the new self, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. Ephesians 4:23 and 24. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And this is a renewal that God does for us, right? So when we read this text, be renewed, it's not like get out there and do it. No, it's let yourself be renewed. Put yourself in a place where you're exposed to the things of God's kingdom. Put yourself in that place and let yourself be renewed by God. I know. If you hadn't just eaten potluck, you'd really want a piece of that cake right now. But we had such good desserts. So, yeah, I think it's okay to have cake sometimes. I don't mean eating poison in your cake. Okay, so I'm using this as a metaphor for films we might watch or something like that. I think it's okay to have some cake. Not poisonous cake, but it's okay to have some cake. We have it on our birthdays, we have it for anniversaries, we have it for special occasions. But we also really need to be thinking that we don't eat cake every day. It's not what we do. This is the kind of stuff that we live on. That's pretty beautiful too, isn't it? That looks good. In fact, that looks good in a whole way that cake never could. So, filling our lives with the things that matter, with the things that will actually nourish our spiritual walk, that's where it's at. Finding those things that are like these vegetables, and some of them are technically fruits here, fruits and vegetables is really, really important. I have some recommended materials. I actually have most of those books in my car that I could show you maybe afterward, but if you wanted to see what they look like in person. But here's some some reading material if you want more, and we are going to have another little session. I'll tell you what that's going to be about in a minute, but really directly related to the things we've been talking about at church and this afternoon, this Captivated DVD, which is also created by Philip Telfer, who wrote the book you see below, is a fantastic message. It's a little bit dated in the sense that, I'm trying to remember what year it came out, but it's at least 10 years old. However, there are smartphones in it. There's all the technology that we're currently using pretty much are in this film, and it is so well put together. I know there are a lot of people that do videos related to, your mind and media and those sort of things. This is, in my view, the best one, partly because I'm a filmmaker myself, and this is a really, really well-made documentary by any standard. And because the people that he interviews in this documentary are the top people in their fields. So this is not, somebody said, or me standing here reading quotes to you. These are the real people who did the research, being interviewed, and giving their quotes. It's top-notch. So it's certainly worth seeing. It's called Captivated. And you can get it on Amazon. All right, I highly recommend it. And then he wrote a book called Media Choices. Very good. We read it together as a family as well a few years back, out loud, and we all really, really appreciated this book on the topic of making good choices. Now if you want to those two are super accessible. The two I just talked about, super accessible. By that I mean it's not like going to be difficult reading levels or hard to understand what's going on in any way. Very, very accessible. Now if you want to be a little more academic about it, then Sherry Turkle, this is also very accessible, but her book, Alone Together, and her other book, Reclaiming Conversation, I highly recommend both of those books as well. A little deeper, more academic, but not unreachable. Same with Irresistible by Adam Alter, also a very, very good book along these similar themes. So those are some things that I would recommend if you want to have more. All right. That concludes what I wanted to say in this presentation this afternoon. And before we have a Q&A here, let me give you a little teaser for the following session, because we're going to take probably a 10-minute break or so in between these sessions. And then in the last session, we're going to shift gears just a little bit to a related topic that has to do with research I did for my dissertation, related to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and our ways of understanding visual media and our ways of thinking about movies going all the way back in our history to the beginning. What we have thought, what we said, who said it, why, out of research I did for my doctoral dissertation. Don't worry, I'm not going to make it sound like a doctoral dissertation, okay? And I think you'll find that. And there, I did some contemporary interviews with people now who are church members, so I think you'll find that enlightening. I hope you will. You'll find out about angels going into the theater and that sort of thing. Okay.